Welcome to this, our TemTeam Cup. May edition. Once again, this will be a match in Group C versus Trotter and Golld. Trotter, of course, you know him, you love him, you may appreciate his particular style of play, which currently very much revolves around some Madrid, Crystal Deluge stuff. And Golld, he's been all sorts of things in his TemTeam career. One of the people that really brought Cerny to the map back in the old days, and has certainly adapted with aplomb to what Sipanku has to offer. I have it on good authority that they are both already champing at the bit to get in game, so let's quickly hop in and catch them both in their respective duel. So, as we get into this, we will see that Trot is running a pretty nature-oriented team with a Volphy, a Saku, an Obi-Wan-O, a Kinu, a Calibus, all sorts of fun, thick things on that side of the board. In the meantime, Trot has, of course, from previous games we've seen there, got a very aggressive lineup available. The Mastion, the Hedgen, all of these are pretty aggro boys, but there's still a lot of mental presence as well in the form of the Adoro and the Nagais. The Nature Koish is not to be sneezed at, and of course the Madrid brings it all together. Definitely a lot of different barbs to go for here, and it should be interesting seeing whether Trot gains the momentum and takes some early KOs, or if Golld is able to slow things down a tad and potentially capitalize on the fact that, honestly, I think if the fires get banned out, this Saku kind of gets a bit of free reign on this board. So, we see the Volphy ban, we see the Hedgen ban. These are both pretty respectable. The Hedgen obviously doing a lot into Golld's lineup. Digital being fairly strong into it. Fire being, of course, very strong into it. The Volphy is just kind of a monster for Trot, as we've seen in previous matchups. Kinu Calibus versus Yukadoro. We've got it straight in here. Yukama Adoro, of course, is a pretty standard opener these days because it gives you that, that marvelous Synergy Master water cannon, which absolutely slaps. This isn't the best board for it, but there's a lot of other tricks that we can see here. Virulent Gust being the other really good one that it gives now. We see very quickly the Mastion ban and the Saku ban. None of that after the fires got banned out there. Trot knowing when he needs to make sure that isn't there. And in the meantime, we see Madrid, Nature Koish, and Nagais all picked up from Trot. As in the meantime, Golld is going for a lot of things that can wind up getting very well supported by Obi-Wan-O, with the Grumper and the Tortonite getting picked up alongside it. So without further ado, let's get into our first of this best of two. So, outside of the fact that the Virulent Gust is going to be very powerful into this Kinu, that's about the only good thing I can say about this lead. And that doesn't say much because honestly, I would expect the Obi-Wan-O to just go hopping right in here, given the fact that the Calibus can slap back into the Yukama, which kind of wants to be saved for a lot of that back line. It's not so good into the Tortonite, it's very good into the Obi-Wan-O and the Grumper, depending on which one you expect to be coming out here. Tortonite's actually pretty reasonable in this as well. Golld recognizes that, brings in the Tortonite, happy to absorb any other hits that are coming in there. As the water cannon comes in, still does a very respectable amount of damage, as we can see from the sheer power of Synergy Master, and the combination of those absolutely getting eaten by Golld's thick forces. The Tortonite from the combination of those attacks only going down to 77.2%. That's honestly more damage than I would expect, given what we can expect from Tortonite. These things can take a licking. Calibus, on the other hand, almost entirely unscathed by this. Really not a board that Yukama wants to stay in on. But the question is, what really can afford to swap in? And the answer is really not much. Ice Stalactites is something that Trot has to worry about. He can't just casually bring in Hazel, his Madrid. But at the same time, anything else that he brings in there just dies to a Toxic Ink. This Calibus is actually very frightening for Trot, since he's not had an appropriate way to sort of deal with it. Still though, Golld has actually swapped it out for the Obi-Wan-O to try to get some more sparks going and things like that. It could even be a double edge variant or something like that. We do see the energy manipulation going down into the Obi-Wan-O. It's not going to do an abundance of damage, but later on perhaps that exhaust might be pretty significant. We see the Crystal Spikes does a pretty sizable chunk, but it's only 40% around. Neron wandering down to a reasonable 60.6% from that. Like, you can take one more of those and that's about it. You obviously don't want to take whatever this Obi-Wan is cooking as well, or if it's a Sparks onto the Tortonite, that's equally problems, but the Inner Spirit is now up, and if Trott's running speed on his Adoro, then that's actually something you really need to be concerned about, even if you're running Prio. Sparks will not outspeed the Crystal Spikes by most accounts. It depends on how fast this Tortonite is. They can sometimes, just because Obi-Wan has just such a magnificent speed, and Tortonite's not known for its particularly alacritous moves. It's more of a stodgy boy, and its 3 Prio can occasionally be outsped by 2 Prio things of a much higher base speed. We see, however, the Obi-Wan swap out there, as instead we see the Calibus hop right back in, potentially anticipating a water cannon hitting in on that spot. Tortonite actually also bouncing, potentially fearing the Inner Spirit, as we do see the Kinu fall in on that spot, giving another buff to this pretty thick Calibus at this point. Does the Inner Spirit get baited out, though, is the question. We see the Aquatic Whirlwind land in on the Calibus. It's going to eat that like an absolute champ. Does not even go down past 80%. And the Inner Spirit does get baited out. Golld reading Trott like a book this game, as the combination of these attacks are just absorbed by the double swap of Golld at this point. Trott's lead's looking drained, and the problem is, once again, this Calibus is back on the board when he wants to reposition, and nothing else really enjoys trying to predict what move this Calibus is going to do on the swap in. Like, if you get Hazel in, fantastic, but if you eat that Ice Stalactite, then you're probably going to be going in with a Mudred that has like 40% HP, and that's a favorable, a charitable estimate, if you will. And in the meantime, we got these other 2 Tems in the back here, the Nature Koish and the Nagais that kind of want to come in, but where precisely do you bring them in? You kind of need a free turn to be able to get hold on them and get the Hypno off, and that's if this Calibus isn't running E-Drink, which we have no confirmation of as of yet. So, yeah, Trott's still kind of in a tough spot here. He does reposition, and he does wind up bringing this Mudred in. That is fair. He wants to get his Crystal Deluge off. But my question is, does this get punished effectively? A sleep onto that would be very powerful, but we'll see what happens there. We actually see a double swap into... Oh, that's how you cover it. Yep, no, that makes sense. This Nagais, if it is indeed a Water Custodian Nagais, would be a fantastic way for the Mudred to appropriately not have to worry about a Water Jet or an Aquatic Whirlwind or what have you. My only problem with that is, an Aquatic Whirlwind, like an Ice Stalactite rather. Let's stick with moves that Calibus actually learns. It's very unlikely this Calibus has a Tsunami. Almost no one's running Tsunami on Calibus at the moment. They tend to favor its more physical options. The Crystal Deluge does come down, stopping the Tortonite from moving at all. As the Hypnosis, the double sleep coming out from Trott and scouting the E-Drink in the process, as the Toxic Ink goes down, but does very little actually into the Nagais there. This is not a physically invested Calibus as it is appearing. So with this, the next question here is, how do we see a reposition from here? We don't have a Crystal Deluge up this turn. The Calibus is kind of still a bit It's unpunished inside this board. I don't see a way for Trott to punish it, as a matter of fact. It's kind of something he just has to whittle down, which is a really awkward thing, given it's not got its stamina down past 50%, and it also is going to just tear into a lot of problematic things on Trott's side. It can probably one-shot the Nature Koish. We're seeing it still do roughly like 30% into Nagais. It walls Adoraboros pretty comfortably, and Yukama can't stay in on it. It's a really hard thing for Trott to deal with at this point in time, especially since it's got that energy drink. Oh! I actually have word that Golld forgot to swap that item off, and it's actually not meant to have energy drink. So Golld will be acting as though his Calibus is asleep for the remainder of this match. What could have been a bit of a tournament gaffe there being resolved by good sportsmanship, which is a very nice thing to see. Obviously, There's a bit of a problem there just through a bit of interactivity beyond that, but it's an interesting thing to see, and it's quite a nice thing for Golld to do in the middle of a battle. Not something that I expect, but honestly, any sign of good sportsmanship inside these sorts of things is wonderful to see. And it's very nice to make sure that Golld is able to resolve that. I'm sure he'll fix that by the time our second match is underway. In the meantime, though, the Kinu coming back in for another set of defensive buffs on Calibus just makes this even more monstrous. 1 second. Yeah, no, it looks like we actually wound up getting a concession out of that game. Right, just gonna wait and see what's going on with that, whether that was an intentional concession or not. It looks like it was, merely due to the fact that that Calibus was just kind of monstrous into that. But, it also could have just been the, yeah, no, we are seeing just call to fix the item and moving on to round 2. That's entirely fair. So, with that, that's actually appears like that's a forfeit on Golld's side voluntarily due to that item. So, that's surprising to see inside that. Once again, it's very noble of Golld to take that kind of sportsmanship stance. I believe that's being logged as a win for Trot there, but at the same time, that's a very, you know, that's a good thing to see. Once again, like, regardless of how unfortunate that is for Golld, I think it's a really noble thing to be able to take that stance inside a tournament and say, yo, I forgot to put on the right thing on this Tem. I'll take the L for that. Sorry about that. I will be, you know, very honorable about that and swap that out next game and, like, tap out of this one. Not something every competitive player will do, and that's just really cool to see. But enough gushing, let's get in to our second game, seeing if they've swapped their items out already. Looks like we are just waiting for them to get in again. That makes a certain degree of sense, given we got a bit of time here. Definitely something that they were going to maneuver around. But it does look like we're going to be waiting a little bit for them to get into their next match. Possibly just waiting for Golld to, like, get to a PC, swap the item on his Calibus, make sure the team's appropriately updated, etc., etc., etc. I doubt this will take an excessive period of time. Still, though, interesting matchup to that team. I do feel like Trot was struggling to keep control of the Calibus that game. If that was energy drink, that would have just been monstrous for sure. But obviously I guess that's not really meant to be energy drink, so we're now in a position where that is getting fixed, obviously. This does mean that you and I get to together explore an entirely new item on that Calibus, which I'm looking forward to. Well, looks like we're still experiencing technical difficulties from both of our contestants. Looks like we had a bit of a whiff match there. Trot picked the wrong team by mistake. Looks like they have resent, though, and they are going in, so we're just going to be going for it. Right, so getting into our next match, it looks like we are seeing a very different set of bands, actually. We see the Calibus band instead of the Volphy, Trot realizing that he really doesn't have enough answers for that Calibus and that it does tear apart his team if he's unprepared. So we do see the Volphy free to go in. Calibus Bastion, however, will certainly punish that in our game 2 here. Grumper obviously has a bit of counterweight inside this scenario, and obviously it makes this Bastion a bit more uncomfortable, but we still see the Saku ban. Are we gonna see a Mudrid ban out of Golld? That's curious. We do see a Mudrid ban out of Golld. This does mean that the Tortonite is much safer. It means the Obi-Wan-O is much more safe. And also the Kinu. There's fewer things that wind up dealing with that as well. In the meantime, we see the Yukama and Nature Coach immediately picked up by Trot on that side right there, as the Kinu is picked up by Golld as well. Obviously, Kinu being a valuable element of this. If it makes it through both bands phases, you almost always see it picked. No Momo in either of these games. An interesting thing to note versus Trot, who has an abundance of mentals, making it potentially a lower priority pick. Still, though, we see the Adoraboros as the final pickup from Trot as we get into our game 2. And with that, going into this, I do feel like, okay, turn 1, a lot of this is going to get decided by, does this Volfi have, does this Volfi actually have handcuffs? If Volfi has handcuffs, then this is going to be kind of a problem for Trott. He's going to want to reposition here. And it looks like Trott's not even taking that bet, as he just immediately swaps into Nature Coish, which is much more comfortable taking all these Earth hits and taking everything else here. We actually see a Lifeful Sap out of Volfi instead, as the Mud Shower does still come down onto Coish. The Toxicant comes in, getting a bit of chip damage on Volfi and just making it pay for a couple of those Lifeful Saps here and there. It's a Sweatband Volfi as well, so it does look like Trott would have been safe keeping the Mastion in, but that's always a wise thing to scout if you do not have the information on that. There's such a difference between Knife Fight Volfi that traps you in and immediately Dust Vortexes you into the Shadow Realm, and Stall Volfi that just sits back, Lifeful Saps, bounces out after doing a bunch of annoying things and exhausting you, and then coming back late game to clean up afterwards. Like, they both fulfill relatively similar but distinct roles. Grumper bounces out, realizing that the water is up, and also there's this Water Cutting Lily staring it in the face, the combination of which are certainly not something that you want to take. As the Tortonite comes in to eat those attacks, it does look like they are being directed directly at the Volfi, however, which goes down to 22%. Definitely not something you want to see. If only there was a Mastion here to try to cage it in, but oh wait, you can't cage Volfi, but you can two-shot it. The poison going first means the Volfi will go down. A very important thing for Trott. If that was able to go out into the back to heal up off those Lifeful Saps, then Trott would have done all that work for nothing. We've seen a number of separate players do the equivalent of 400% to Volfis over the course of a game because they're able to just Lifeful Sap up in the back. This does, however, mean that we get the free swap in on Kinu. That obviously being very valuable for a pretty defined win condition out of Golld. If he's able to take care of the Mastion, he has a fantastic time just carrying through this with Tortonite, which weathers most of the other things on Trott's team pretty comfortably, honestly. Like, the Blizzard off the Yukama is a bit worrisome, but the cage comes down. Will Trott get caught out by his own tricks? He's the first person I expect to respect this, and he does. Charging in instead, no swaps caught out, as instead he just goes barreling into the Kinu. The Kinu does throw down a Beta Burst. Looks like that is on the Nature Coish, trying to catch out a quick KO, which it does. I think that's actually disadvantageous for Golld, because getting a KO inside the first turn of Cage means that you have no way to reposition on your other Tem. And with the Kinu going down, that feels like maybe you would have wanted to swap the Kinu anyways into, like, I don't know, Obi-Wan-O or something like that. Something else to take that hit instead so you can get more Kinu swaps off. Still though, we see the Grumper come in to cover the potentiality of a Mastion swap in. Trott does not take that bait, instead goes for the Yukama to continue pushing in on the Grumper slot. Interesting play. What we could see this turn is like a water jet into a water cannon, the combination of those on the Chamomile-less Grumper, incidentally. Knowing that the Sweatband is also on Volfi means this could be a wild card. I'm trying to think of what other item Grumper even wields. Is this the legendary, rare, and zesty Drought Grumper? Does this have handcuffs? I don't expect this, but you know, a lot of the usual items I see on Grumper are taken. It could be Matcha Grumper, actually. That's another thing it could be. We haven't seen a Matcha on this team. Grumper, if this is Coward's Rest, would be very valuable for that. We haven't seen any procs for Inductor yet because we haven't had the opportunity to. It's Reactive Vial. All right, that's another interesting item on Grumper. Not one I expected, as the Stonewall comes down on the Tortonite, making it that much more of a chore for Trott to take down at this point. Definitely looking like a weaker position than Golld was in Game 1. Obviously, that Game 1, if it were legal, we would have seen a bit more sleep control inside there, but at the same time, that Calibus still would have just been a brick wall for Trott to try to engage with. Just not an easy thing whatsoever. In the meantime, we see the Obi-Wan-O hop into the board instead, ready to take things back, as it eats an energy manipulation, very similar to the previous game. As the Tortonite's Garden does go down, this is most likely going into the Calibus, which is one of the harder things for him to try to take down. Yep, there we go. So he does OX for that. This does mean that there's a bit of time that can be taken for a reposition. I think the funniest way you could take off Doom here is like, Oh, yeah, no, swapping in Mastion, and if Mastion has Cage, then you could, like, Lava Wave turn 1, Cage turn 2, or Cage turn 1, Lava Wave turn 2. It's a bunch of momentum loss, though, is the problem, and I think that's what Golld's hoping Trot will take the bait for. Like, at this point, if you just get more value out of your Calibus before it goes down, that's really all you need. The Inner Spirit gets devoured by the still nullified Grumper, which then is gonna eat the Burrow alongside that, meaning that if this Calibus has done a move this turn, it will not fire. It does fire that off and overexert into the Obi-Wan-O. This is mad momentum coming out from Golld thanks to this Obi-Wan-O. Trot has identified this time and time and again as that horrible floating Tem that I don't like, and it's definitely not one he's liking today. He's gonna need to make sure that his like double-ins are on point in order to make sure he can get past this Obi-Wan-O's defenses, because otherwise it's going to wind up with meaningless overexertions like what we just saw. So with this in mind, we have the Tortonite in the back on Golld's side. We still, of course, have 4 Tems available for now on Trot's side. The Mastion and the Yukama still available as well. That's a pretty strong back line into a lot of what Golld has left. Most importantly, they're also fast. We do see the sparks go down on Grumper, though, and that could get a little scary. The Virulent Gust, however, does still break the, it does break the evade, but my question is, was that wise? Because now you're giving Golld more of a reason to bush. It's slightly disadvantageous to bush before that. I don't know whether that's a good idea since, though, right? In the meantime, the Yukama comes in. I don't think it outspeeds an Obi-Wan-O's bush, but you know what? I've seen stranger things in my time, and if we still see a double in of an Ice Stalactite and a Water Cannon into the Obi-Wan-O spot, that's definitely something there. The problem is you're doing that staring a +2 special defense Obi-Wan-O and a +1 special attack Grumper that's definitely going to tear you apart, that has just lost its exhaust thanks to the bush and the power of dual status, but this is a drill Yukama, and it has torn this Grumper apart. Definitely something that's going to turn the tides again on this. It explains why Trot was so eager to just happily bring this in, as that horrifying win condition out of Golld is just, you know, knocked out of the water right there. Pretty easy, huh? The downside now, though, is that this Tortonite's back, and it weathers pretty much everything else that Trot can sort of bring at it from this Yukama. You know, there's still the chance of a blizzard, meaning we still have the potential of a double in, but honestly, as a late game board, this feels more advantageous to Golld than I'd expected. The challenge that I have here is that it's not overwhelmingly hard to see a double in on one of these. So we see the Tesla Prison go down into the Yukama. It's reasonable damage, and the minus speed is the other important thing there. We see the double in, of course, as the Crystal Spikes takes it down to under 50%. So this does mean that the combination of those will actually take this down, meaning we won't get any more synergy for that Lava Wave. The Water Cannon does go down into the Obi-Wan-O, but thanks to that luscious special defense from that bush, it's a lot harder to take it down, and it takes that hit like a champ. Still at 43%, we're going to need to see an Aquatic Whirlwind next turn in order for this Yukama to be able to take down that Obi-Wan-O. And then my question continues, you know, actually, okay, I'm looking at this again, and I'm flipping that question back there. If we are seeing Prio off a drill Yukama, what's Golld's out here? Because I was kind of expecting this Obi-Wan-O to do a lot of the blunting of the Shark, but the Shark's been unscathed here. Mastion's still at 53. The only thing stopping Mastion at this moment is the fact that that Tortonite is thick as balls, and with +4/+3 in terms of its defenses. And then, like, at the same time, we still have the low stamina on the Mastion. Those are like the most severe impediments to this, but we still have Flaming Meteorite. We have the ability to rest. It's like, you know, if you can outpace the Doom, which is 4 turns, which is a pretty comfortable timer, if you're okay with a hard overexertion, then that's fine. As we can see, the Aquatic Whirlwind still outspeeds despite the -1. You should have gotten like maybe 1 more minus speed in there, thanks to that, because the 3 Prio off of the high base speed of that is still a lot to deal with. The Meteor Swarm comes down instead, and that's definitely enough damage going into this. It looks like Trot will be taking our second game, unless Golld can pull a rabbit out of his hat, maybe another magical energy drink, but we both know Golld's more honorable than that. We've already seen that so far. So, with this, it does look like Golld's gonna die a warrior and let himself go down to the Flaming Meteorite. I'm assuming that the combination of a Flaming Meteorite and a Blizzard will take this Tortonite down. A quick moment of respect for the fact that a +4 Tortonite was able to live a Pyromaniac Fire Chip Flaming Meteorite, one of the strongest unbuffed fire moves in the game, taking under 50% from it. Still, though, I would like to congratulate Golld and Trot. Congratulations, of course, to Trot for taking both games. Obviously, the first one had a little bit of baggage associated with it. I'm sure that our TOs will organize that in their own time. But in the meantime, I would like to congratulate him anyways for dominating that second game at the end there, certainly making sure that he had a matchup that wound up genuinely working favorably for him, knowing he could rely on that Drill Yukama. But yes, in the meantime though, if you guys are thirsty for more matches, as you guys saw inside our previous overlay, there's a bunch going down in roughly 12 hours from now. So please stay tuned. We have still a absolute plethora of games still available. We of course still have Shiznix versus Axolotus, Shiznix versus Golld, Lukleel versus Zukli, Golld versus Axolotus, Yellow versus Mr. Rishi, and of course Tsubaki-chan versus Friesen, all back to back to back to back to back to back tomorrow, starting at around 11:30 UTC. So I'd like to thank you all once again for coming by. I've been Quarter, and have a lovely time wherever you are.